today I am going to share our journey around our LMS implementation and our Skillsoft journey. So the journey actually started with the formulation of our learning and development strategy. And in formulating our strategy, we had to firstly understand the context in which learning is required to be delivered. Now, this context is shaped by both the macro context as well as the business context. So starting off looking at the macro context, we understand that we live in a world of exponential change, technological advancement, and evolving customer expectations, resulting in skills having an exponentially shrinking shelf life, resulting in this constant need for reskilling and upskilling. In this context, the biggest competitive advantage in the future will be an agile, skilled workforce of continuous learners who are able to adapt and innovate to create organizational success. Lifelong learning has therefore become an economic imperative, and companies need to focus on curating a continuous learning environment where employees or learners can direct their own learning in the flow of work, just in time, real time, to create value for the organization. So ultimately, the internal marketplace or the internal talent marketplace has become the competitive advantage of the future. Once we looked at the macro context, we overlaid this with, sorry, I have not been moving the slides. We overlaid this with our business context, and we identified 6 key strategic pillars that we wanted to drive within the organization. The first one being creating a learning culture, a self-directed learning culture in the short term that would involve Sanlam into a learning organization in the long term. To leverage multiple learning technologies to create a learning ecosystem that supported continuous learning, facilitating speed to competence and speed to market. We then also, the third pillar, wanted to focus on how do we build core and critical capability for performance today and growth in the future. Number 4, we wanted to focus on how we truly leverage our capability building ecosystem, which is a combination of internal and external partnerships to create maximum impact when we build capability in the organization, and we wanted to optimize that. So that was the 4th pillar. The 5th one being very much about us looking at how do we build the leadership mindsets and skill sets required to successfully execute and drive organizational strategy in the context of the unprecedented and unpredictable future that we now live in. And lastly, the last and 6th pillar was about us looking more internally and saying, how do we transform the learning function to be a proactive, value-creating contributor that is iterative and adaptive in how we build skills within the organization. The launch of the Skillsoft e-learning solution was a key vehicle for us to drive many of the strategic pillars that I've just spoken to. Our launch was called Future Fit Me because the intention was all around building a future fit workforce and ensuring the current workforce was future fit. So we launched this just having about 2 months in our first year. And there were 3 key focus areas that we sort of focused on in terms of this launch. What we wanted to achieve in this launch, in the short period we had, was 1, position the strategic rationale for why we were doing this as an organization. Secondly, we wanted to position the employee value proposition. What was in this for employees and why should they be interested? And the third one was very much a focus on introducing and educating employees around the solution. We wanted to use this time, because we didn't have much time in this year when we launched, to almost introduce, get their feet dipped in terms of an experience and engagement, for them to just step in and understand what the solution could offer. And we did this by having launches of the solution at every business level. So there was an immense amount of launch sessions taking employees through the solution with the intention of introduction and education. Another key element that we did in this year, we worked with the LRMG team and we mapped our full competency framework with content, which we then intended to use at a later stage. And we knew we could then draw on this at any point. And then our final marketing campaign as part of this year, in 2021, was we built a marketing campaign around 5 universal competencies that every Sanlam employee is expected to have. And we built learning journeys for each of those 5 competencies. And over a 5-week period, we launched a competency a week, encouraging people to engage, educate, and experience the system. Our real first year of implementation, I would say, was 2022, where we could now deep dive much further into the solution and really try and drive adoption and engagement. We focused on 3 areas as part of our 2022 continuation of the implementation. Firstly, we embedded skills of content in our key leadership initiatives and other capability building initiatives within the group, so that people had the opportunity to do the normal classroom or virtual learning, but also then engage with some of the skills of content. As part of our performance management system, we highly promoted, we really drove it to show people how they could literally link skills of content in their personal development plans, in their performance management conversations, and just how seamless this was. And once they did the learning, it would automatically tick that as part of their personal development plans. We then also began content recommendations, looking at senior leaders driving content, as well as experts, with the intention of giving people a gateway or a door, that content that related directly to them in their roles and would appeal to them. And we drove that a lot. What we also did 6 months after that September implementation in 2021, in 2022, we did an evaluation to hear from users about how they were finding the solution, what was working, what was not working. And the 3 top findings was: 1, people still felt there was a lack of awareness and communication around the solution and even where to find it. The second big one was a lack of sufficient deep IT-related content. And a lot of the technical people said, I'm not finding the deep technical content I would like. And I think the biggest request was around people saying, could we have far more structured learning? Can you please structure the learning far more? What must I learn for my role, for my next role? In terms of content, in terms of a particular expertise, can you structure content? So there was a huge request for structured learning. But I think the overwhelming positive around the survey was the fact that more people who were not using the system responded than those who were. And there was this unanimous gratitude for having the opportunity, for having the solution, with people even saying, please don't take it away. I know I haven't used it, but please just give me the opportunity to get in. I will, I just don't have the time. And that was very gratifying for us as a team. As the year ended, Sanlam launched its new values, and we then worked with the team who was leading this initiative to map learning journeys to the Sanlam values, with the aim of creating greater understanding around the values as this program kicked off and launched towards the end of 2022. As we move then into the current year, what is the plan? The plan is very much around looking at what the evaluation survey said and almost making sure that we act on it. The first and the very exciting element around what we're doing this year is we've drafted a year-long communication campaign. And the campaign aims at driving curiosity, discovery, interest, and engagement around the solution. We'll be using multiple levers like screensavers and information in mailers that go out weekly, etc., etc. But we really want to drive those elements, like I said, with the organization, in the hope that people will come in and go, aha, I didn't know I could do that. Oh, I learned that. So that's a huge drive, a very exciting campaign that I'm looking forward to. It's kicked off, and yeah, we will wait and see. The second big drive for this year is we are driving very much structured parts as requested by employees. And some of the big ones we're doing is we have a PA Academy, and we've structured learning parts for the general curriculum, and that will be available to those going through that training. So we're excited about that. We have a huge DEIB campaign this year. We've structured parts for the manager, for the employees, and there's going to be a huge campaign and marketing around what that team wishes to achieve, supported by Skillsoft and the content. And we've done branding for the content, etc. So again, very exciting. And lastly, to share a third example with you, we had a digital marketing campaign, campaign and academy that we did last year, which was extremely successful, where we did a combination of Skillsoft, Facebook, and Google content, but launched on Skillsoft. which was oversubscribed, and we're doing that again this year. So very exciting. And lastly, I think that one other very exciting project is we bought licenses for the technical teams to start getting what they wanted out of the system. And what's worked very well for us is that we've partnered with the heads of IT. They've defined the pillars of competency they wish to build in the organization. We've worked with the LRMG team to build these learning paths, and we have the heads of IT as our ambassadors running out with this, rolling out with this, supporting and managing success. And for us, it's tremendous to have business be the ambassadors of what we're doing. We already have had a request to say, can we have more? We need more. What we've bought is not enough. With people really excited about the content and offering. And yes, we'll continue with the recommendations from senior leaders and experts, because it's a very sticky kind of marketing where people do get attracted when they hear a senior person found something to be extremely valuable. And that will continue in the background. As part of this journey, we also built what we call a skills dashboard. And I'm going to share snippets of what we have built so far, already looking to enhance this to a phase 2. I'm going to move there. So this is what we have currently and what we can see in terms of the activity. I'll go to areas of interest on each of the slides. So this is the dashboard, and I'm going through it slide by slide. On this slide, the interest would be at the bottom left, where you would look at out of 15,000 users, there's 55% of that population that's accessed the solution, and 36% that have engaged in the solution. And this would be year 1 stats. So obviously we would like to do better, but I think we've done phenomenal in what we've achieved. So that's what you've seen on this slide. Important to note, all these elements you see on the dashboard, you can drill down and up. It's in Power BI, and you can easily view different facets of data. On the next one, very much on the right, if you want to look at training interventions by business unit, it just gives you a sense of the interventions on the system that have been completed and started, and the number in terms of interventions. You also see on the right, the average learning hours per employee currently, which is 2.8 on the right-hand side of the screen. On the next slide, if I can bring your attention to the bottom right, what's interesting here to see is the time that people are spending on training. And our biggest area in the circle on the bottom right, you can see is the pink area, with 29% of this population that are currently active spending over 120 minutes on learning, followed by the light blue area on the top, where 23% are spending 1 to 15 minutes on learning. On the next slide, it's very much a trend analysis. I think we like to watch the bottom one in terms of learning activities, almost our barometer, if learning is high or low in a particular month. And you can see over the 12-month period, we're able to track the learning activity throughout the organization, with the top graphs just showing completed and started sessions in detail. This slide is basically structured according to how Skillsoft stacks content in the solution, and this is the highest level of the stack. So we can look and see what are the areas that people are interested in, where is the most learning happening. So you can see the greatest number of learning interventions taking place based on these stats is professional improvement, followed by management. You can then drill down into professional improvement and management and have a look deeper, which I'll share. You can also see on the right-hand side, any business can click on a checkbox and look at their business and go deeper into the sub-business. So if we look at professional improvement, this is what you would see. This is now, if I drill down on that first line, you can see that personal accountability is the area of content that's been most used, followed by individual professional performance. And that's where people are focusing on. The second one, I'm going back just to show you, was management. And if we look at management, this is where people are focusing: leadership essentials, business strategy, followed by management essentials. So those are the areas, if you drill down, you will see are the areas that people are focusing on. We also have a slide here on demographics, and it just gives us a sense on what's happening from a demographic point of view. You can see, I'll focus on the key ones. You can see the females are leading on the bottom left in terms of learning versus their male counterparts, significantly leading, which is nice to see. On the top right, you can see the job levels, and we see that the people that are really involved in learning is your junior management and your semi-skilled. Sorry, there's a slight of overlap there on the text, but it's your junior management and your semi-skilled. And then at the bottom, the age groups that are significantly involved would be your between 26 and 35 in blue, followed by your orange, 36 and 45. So it also gives you the age groups involved in learning. We also have this data, which you see here, is when are people learning? And if you actually look at the slide, I think 12 o'clock in the day, in sort of the middle, the first orange, 4890, it tells you the number of hours that took place, number of learning hours that took place at that time of the day. So 12 o'clock seems to be a peak, followed by, I think it's 6 o'clock in the morning, seems to be a peak as well. And then obviously a little bit, I think later in the day, more around 10 o'clock and not 10 o'clock itself. So that's what you're seeing in terms of time of learning and when people are actually engaging in the content. So it also gives us a sense of when people learn in the organization. We also have started to do some analysis around assessments on the system. How many assessments are being taken? You can see there's been 23,671 assessments completed on the system. And this slide basically shows the average high score that people achieve per business and the average first score, which is on your top left, that people achieve in the business. So this is the first cut we've done really of the assessment data and want to do a bit further on this. But that's what we're able to see. We can, on the graph next to that, you see the number of attempts that people are taking to do assessment on the system. We have top 10 learners, and you can see their names and who they are and the number of learning hours that they have completed. And this you can do for every business unit in the organization by ticking a box on the right. And that's my presentation. Thank you.
Much, Ravika. That's really insightful and really relevant, I think, for our audience today who are in a position like yours, leading learning in corporate organizations. And I think you said, like Jack Welch did about 20 years ago, an organization's ability to learn and translate that learning into action rapidly is the ultimate competitive advantage. But it doesn't happen on its own, and it's sort of build it and there will come situation. And you've presented a lot about how you've driven adoption, and although it's not where you'd like it to be, what have been the most successful adoption drivers that you've experienced so far?
I would say the very first thing we did, I think, was the right place to start. And I think everybody knows, I think we presented our project, our intention, our journey to Exco. So we went to Group Exco and we explained what we wanted to achieve. And then I think we had a very clear strategy on what we were going to do at a group level to push and what we were going to do at a business level, because business level tends to have a very different appeal to a person who understands their business versus something coming from a very high level. I think through that process, we actually got ambassadors where some of the CEOs themselves were actually writing about Skillsoft and actually encouraging people to go into Skillsoft and saying, but you have this tool. And I think every time we got a request for something, we said, but did you not check Skillsoft? It's there. You wanted to learn this, it's there. And I think we became ambassadors as learning heads throughout the organization. We had ambassadors in our CEOs. We had people approaching us, and we had prepackaged stuff that we knew that it would appeal to people in the organization. So I think it was a combination, and I think we've learned, we've matured. I think we started in infancy, we're probably still in infancy, but I think as we go, we learn a little more, we do it a little better, and we get it right a little bit more than we did the last time. So that would answer the question, I guess.
It's so important to speak about that engagement at an executive level and a business level, but it brings about a big responsibility to then demonstrate value back if they are supporting and endorsing these programs. How do you go and present that value and impact back to them post the engagement from their people, and how do you continue to use them productively in the journey?
I think our approach may be not traditional in that I believe we display value when we engage with them, because I don't think there's any need to engage if there's no value, would be my view. So the value is not at the end, the value is at the start. So for example, the IT project is a perfect example. We are allowing business to create what they think would be of value, and we're not deciding that for them. So I think our approach is very much, how do we agree on the value of what we're about to roll out for you? What are we about to deliver for you? So there is no conversation about did we deliver value, because we package value. I think the challenge is more around creating the context and an environment that's far more conducive to learning, where learning is far more supportive, And we're trying to work far more closely with business in bridging that gap. So we prove value upfront to say, don't engage in this if you don't think it's of value, but have a look. And if you think it's of value, then let's go with it. And we haven't had an instance where someone could say, this is not value. Because everybody's excited about what they see. Everybody's excited about what they can achieve. It's about executing, delivering, and making sure people go the journey.
Getting a bunch of comments really highlighting the value and how impressive your data analytics is in your environment, and that data maturity is so important today to drive decision making. How have you gone about establishing that capability in your team and creating live dashboards for decision making and judgments?
So we leverage it from a center of excellence within the Sanlam HR team. So we have a center area that does data and analytics. So I don't have the expertise particularly in my team. I leverage that from a centralized service, and in partnership we build, we understand, and we say what we would like to see and what kind of metrics would be of value to us. And we initially didn't start with as many slides of the dashboard as I've shared today. We started somewhere small. We understood what are some of the best practice metrics. And as we saw, we drew deeper and we said it would be nice to know when people learn. It would be nice to know who's learning demographically. And we just kept on enhancing the dashboard. And there's still so much more we could do, but I think it's actually become an important window into the world of Skillsoft for us. And it's been extremely valuable.
Speaking about what you could still do, a great question from Irvin in the chat is, what do you think is your next big challenge or hurdle to overcome to create this elusive learning culture?
I think the one challenge that we all know, which is universal, and it's something that keeps me up at night, and I'm sure everyone else, is time to learn. So people keep on telling us, but I love the content and I think it's great, but I just don't have the time because I'm busy with this project or I'm studying this. So I think for me, that's the one big challenge, that I think we're trying to find inroads to, and saying, how do we do it differently? How do we create that space? How do we create that commitment? Do we run with business in supporting us and creating a dedicated space is one thought. Do we encourage people to learn after work? I think, like I said, for me, there's so much value in what we have. How do we create the space that people have the time and they have this independence to go in, consume? Because I always say, and I've used this analogy before, it's like we want to win this Formula One race, but nobody wants a pit stop, and we're the pit stop, because if you stop, you'll win the race. And that's an analogy I think is powerful, because we're trying to find ways on how we create the pit stop. And I think we're not yet there, but I think that's one of the, to answer what Owen is referring to, I think that's one of those elusive challenges as practitioners throughout the world. I think we all challenge with, but want to seek an answer to.
Speaks to that old adage of sharpening the axe before you go and cut down the forest. Make sure that you're efficient, but take the time to do that. But I think in terms of incentives and what drives learning and adoption is the important relationship between learning and talent. How do you create visibility around how skills might improve individuals' careers, get them promotions or access to vacancies in the business? What sort of partnership exists between yourselves and the talent team in Sanlam?
Well, I think we do have a close partnership. I think with any partnership, one can always improve. But I think the fact is that because everything is digital, it's online, it's accessible. I think the process is to look at the people who we consider to be talent. I think the view is also that everybody's talent, and that's my view. And I think, but when we zoom in to say who are the real people that we need to look after and etc., I think all the data is available online. So in Sanlam, whether it's learning or skills or talent, mapping or positioning. So I think there's a very strong partnership, and it's almost fluid, if I want to say. So those conversations are supported by the digital elements we have online. You can see what a person's learning history looks like. I wouldn't say we're at the point of a pure and open talent marketplace. I don't think we are. I think that's the ultimate, and I think a lot of the organizations are trying to move towards that. I don't think we're there, but I think it's a journey we're on. And I think we're trying to see how do we intelligently intertwine all these elements to inform, guide, and drive a journey in that direction.
Important, I think, given the limitations of a digital learning platform, how do you drive that socialization and application of learning, which really builds impressive skills and capability in the business, moving towards a capability academy type of structure?
So I think focusing on what we're presenting today, and if I had to look at Skillsoft, the solution is blended into many other things and not necessarily exists on its own, if I put it that way. So we would use traditional methodologies of how we would evaluate application value in Skillsoft. There's a nice assessments also for people to determine where they are on certain skills, where you self-evaluate. And now with the Skillsoft skills benchmarking, that's going to become even more powerful, especially in the IT field where people can assess themselves, understand where they are. But I think we rarely look at Skillsoft in isolation in how we deliver impact and value. It's always part of something bigger. And we evaluate that in the context of how we traditionally would any learning intervention in terms of the intended outcome.
Tell us a little bit about your structure, because you're speaking about great and tight engagement with business, using data to make decisions that inform plans. What sort of roles are important within your team, and what skills are you developing around you to ensure that you've got a sustainable, value-adding learning ecosystem?
Just repeat that, Omri. It was a bit of a long one. Paying attention.
Sorry. Specifically, what are the skills and roles that are important in your own team that enable such a mature environment?
So let me tell you this. My team is two. It's me and one other person, if you're talking about individuals who drive us. I think what we do very well in Sanlam is we leverage the broader team. So there's a head of learning in every business and they have teams. I think what you're seeing is a culmination of joint thinking, effort, implementation. So we draw on the broader team. I think the one thing I would say that's important, and it's something I said in as part of my presentation earlier, I think we're also a team that's willing to change, willing to try new things. We're very conscious of the fact that this whole concept of being agile and iterative and not constant and static and delivering the same thing continuously, we're very aware of it, but we have to remind ourselves. So I think from a skill set, it's the skills that will support a team in that direction, that people are willing to change and move and think differently and learn new skills, have learning agility as part of their DNA. So I think we, to some extent, have got that right. I mean, I wouldn't say we've got everything right, but I think because we leverage a broader, diverse team with all that thinking and skill sets and the willingness to know that we may not get it right, the willingness to know that we have to constantly adapt, try again, think again, do again, and hopefully succeed. I think it's something we're trying to inculcate in the team so that we don't ever stop and we keep on thinking, what's the next win? How do we get the next win? And what's the next challenge?
I had the privilege of joining one of your L&D forums the other day. And I think that's a great recipe and a secret sauce around keeping everyone on the same page and aware of the solutions and the investments that you're making. What tips can you give our audience around establishing a cadence of communication with a business like that?
Sure. I think what we do have is, I think also maybe to share that this was established over the last 2 years, in that Sanlam did not have a centralized structure where we all communicated and shared ideas, etc. And in line with our culture strategy called Winning as One, there was this huge drive for us to win together. And what we established was a learning forum where we could share strategically thinking, debate things, look at new things, technology, etc. We also have, operational meetings every second week where we make key decisions about projects, etc. So I think there's this constant glue, formally and informally, where we connected, where we engaged, where we understand that we need to win together. And we have a team that's vested in winning together. And I think that's almost been the secret sauce for success. Because everything I've shared with you is what we do together. It's not one piece of the organization. So I think you've got to formally structure it so that people engage. You've got to make sure everybody buys into the strategy and they believe it's going to work. And when you deliver value as a team, it becomes addictive. People understand what they can get out of it. and then people don't leave. And that's the winning solution, I would say.
Yeah, success is infectious. Lovely compliments in the chat around what you've managed to achieve and sharing responsibility in your partnership with the business. But a question from Kwaku coming through is, what will you advise one can do to drive a learning culture with the organization when learning is not a conversation and it's not on the agenda of the executive and management team?
I think, when you make people realize that, like I said, in a race, in an F1 race, there's a pit stop and you're that pit stop. And the future is about a learning advantage and a people advantage. I think you almost need that aha moment to make them understand. If I understood the question properly, it seemed like learning is not on the landscape. It's not something that's considered important. So you almost got to drive a conversation where you actually make people realize that it is. And once that light switches on, I think they will start listening. I think the stats out there, the research is out there. I know you've had Gartner. I mean, skills in every job is increasing every year. Skills are changing in every job every year. As the years go, some of that skill is becoming obsolete. So I think there's realistic statistics, there's realistic drive, and where you can anchor your conversation. And I think when you switch that light on and people understand what you're talking about and why it's so important, I think that's the way forward. And hopefully they will listen and allow you. And I think as you create success, people listen more. And I think if you're not going to do it, employees are going to demand it anyway. And as an organization, you're not going to be competitive if you're not growing your people, and people are going to leave anyway because they want growth, they want promotion. And those are the things that people do value.
You've spoken about the shelf life of skills and the trends and the importance of talent development and people development in business and how it is a strategic agenda. And I think that credibility that you have comes from a lot of personal understanding and research. So maybe to share, how do you educate yourself on what's happening in the world of learning and what trends are happening within business to be able to sustain a conversation of this nature with your executive?
How do I just repeat that part of the sentence? How do you
keep yourself up to speed on current trends in business and learning?
I think, Omri, I'm very passionate about what I do. And I think I'm very curious about the world around me. So I don't think I ever stop learning, although it's not formal. And I don't really personally like formal learning. I'm constantly reading articles, whether it's Burson, Gartner, the ones I like. And I subscribe to other channels as well, where if I see something of interest, it's this constant curiosity for understanding, challenging my mindset to say, what more? How can I think of this? What value could it be for the organization? So I think myself being a lifelong learner, passionate about my field, wanting to continuously grow and learn, challenge history and possible future. I'm constantly in that phase, and I actually enjoy the times where I'm able to deep dive. And able to, dip into the research and then marry it back to what we're doing on the landscape, and constantly rethinking, how do we create more value, different value? I think that's the challenge, and that's how I keep up to date and how I'm able to have those conversations and know what's happening in my industry.
Challenge yourself and challenge your team to stay ahead of the curve.
Mm-hmm.
Another question here is, what is the focus of your L&D forum? Kwaku has recently established an annual L&D forum, but what examples of activities and topics might you recommend to focus on?
I think we try and keep the forum very strategic, because we also at one point said which forum and meeting focuses on what. So almost the weekly frequency meetings are operational, The learning forum is far more strategic, where we look big picture, future picture. We also keep ourselves relevant with some of the latest technologies that we talk about and experience. We look at plans for strategic projects. So ideally what we do is keep the learning forum to be far more strategic, where we get all the businesses to present strategy. So we all have a sense of what's happening throughout the organization. And we look at strategic initiatives that we want to work on together, and that's where it happens, but also strategic thinking, strategic opportunities, all that becomes part of the forum. So we also would like to see technologies, solutions that we're not to or favor, build our understanding around that as part of a broader strategy. So I would say forum is very much strategic.
I think maybe what I've experienced is we're able to have lovely strategic conversations in these forums, and a lot of things then get suspended there. How do you drive continuous action and improvement and iteration, as you mentioned earlier, post the decisions that are made in that forum, to actually operationalize those decisions?
So those decisions get operationalized in the operational meetings that happen every 2 weeks. So we take that and we run with projects and plans, and we deliver through the operational meetings.
Fantastic. What are some of those strategic conversations you're having? Any in particular that you think have been quite relevant and resulted in good action?
Well, I think first the formulation of the strategy started there, and the formulation of the partnerships we have with the business started there. So I think every year we start off with looking at the strategies across the 6 to 7 businesses on a high level. So we understand some of the things that intersect and we partner on, etc. We understand what the group strategy is, and then we underlay the other strategies. We also particularly look at technology strategy as part of those meetings. And we also talk about strategy on some of the key projects. And like I said, we often bring in guests and vendors who can build on or inform strategy and way forward to bring some new thinking. It could also be somebody from a Gartner or another institution that brings some of that thinking as part of that. And it's a broader community in the Learning Forum compared to the strategic meetings where it's a smaller community of people because we need to make decisions. So yeah, I think we talk about our B scorecard and how we're going to achieve that, because that's strategic as well. So those are the kind of elements that we bring to that forum for discussion and unpacking.
Mentioned the scorecard in particular, and we're always interested in demonstrating value. How is your performance measured, by the business? How do you demonstrate your own performance as an L&D leader?
As an L&D leader,
what is your business expecting of you to demonstrate in terms of your own performance in the role?
Well, I guess that's very much a normal performance agreement. But I think what sits with me is driving strategy for the organization. So I'm very much accountable for ensuring that I drive strategy, across the organization, and I deliver value, and I call it horizontal value across the organization that we can all benefit. And you'll find that people in the businesses and clusters tend to focus on the vertical value they create in their businesses. And my role and what I'm evaluated and what my mandate is, am I creating the horizontal value I can from the things that we can gain from economies of scale, scope, cost, value? That's my mandate. And that's what I'm expected to deliver on. So I would say that is what I would be evaluated on.
Give us an example. So you mean you're able to straddle across verticals within the business and try and combine conversations and integrate value? How do you cross-pollinate between the business through the lens of learning and development?
Well, I think, Umri, it's very much about what are the things that we can do together that make sense to do together. So maybe I'll use an example and say a lot of the group leadership programs are leadership programs across the business. So we don't have every business having leadership programs. And we agree on how we want to structure that, what's transitional, what's transformational, our women leadership program. So we have all those combinations. So that would be an example of where we would collaborate as a team and create value for the whole organization through an initiative like that. And that would be incumbent on me to drive and show value for, as an example.
Maybe one last thing before we wrap. What do you envisage will change most dramatically in the learning landscape into the future? We talk about the metaverse and learning experience platforms and capabilities. Fast forward into the future, what do you expect learning organizations to look like?
I don't think I'm going to say anything different or new. I think we all know technology, AI, those are the things that are going to create that learning ecosystem I spoke about, that's going to drive speed to competence, speed to market, speed to value. So I think the enabler, what technology could possibly do is probably the biggest element that we can look forward to. But I think it's how we also then support that. That's not the only thing. But I think that's going to be the exciting piece. But I think it doesn't mean that. I think the human piece is still very much important, and very much I think how Accenture talks about it, human-machine partnership. That is the future. But I think I see this area, and I think we all know the technology space is very complex when it comes to learning. It's not very clear cut, and I think you're gonna find far more happening. But I think we look forward to what technology will allow us to do, because a lot of what we think we should have and achieve is almost utopia, and we're all trying to achieve it. And I think technology may take us closer to what we want to achieve.
You've actually had a lovely bit of innovation in your space with the chatbot around learning, and dabbled in a bit of artificial intelligence there. What did you learn from that experience?
I think that was very much more in the Sanlam environment that you're talking about. So sorry, Omri, unfortunately, I'm unable to share. Don't know that one in too much detail.
Sorry about that, but I think absolutely AI and machine learning, something which we're hearing Skillsoft working a lot on in terms of driving recommendations, developing intelligent learning paths, and to your point, I think potentially doing some of the heavy lifting for L&D teams by creating a self-directed platform to go along with a self-directed learning culture. But really appreciate all.
Yeah, I think for me, the biggest challenge is learning personalization, and I think that's what we need to solve. It's one that keeps me up at night. So we can have the technology, but like I said, we're on the road to utopia. Hopefully we get there.
We're privileged to be part of that journey with you, and thanks so much for your time and the insightful presentation.